You know it's about to get real when I have to make the tea. Well, it's not that there's a whole lot of tea to be spilt, but this is one of the most polarizing phones of the year, maybe of all time. What do I think? Well, that's what I'm going to try and explain to you in this full review. Kind of a meta background look at this. This is actually the second time I'm filming this video because I can't find the A-roll from my first attempt. But in any case, this is Joshua Vergara. What's going on, everybody? It's time for my full review on this here Pixel 4 XL. Since I have the XL edition, design is what we're going to start with, and I think this phone is pretty damn big. It's large yet small in a few key ways. On the one hand, having this much display move this quickly is awesome, but the general design of the phone is much more simplistic and understated than you might expect. The panda color is also the way to go, by the way. There's this little color flourish on the side. This is the power button that has a little bit of that Thousand Island dressing color. You see, I prefer a little bit of this rather than going full animal style fries on the orange version of the Pixel 4. By the way, quick shout out to the girlfriend, Isa Rodriguez. Her video on why she did not like the orange version of the Pixel 4 is a perfect example of the polarizing opinions people have on this phone. Focusing on the screen though, it's honestly really great, despite the fact that the best part of it isn't actually used all the time. I'm talking of course about that high refresh rate. You have to force it on in the developer settings if you want to see that smoothness all the time. Now, I have not done that on this phone due to my futile attempts to get better battery life. More on that in a little bit. When the 90Hz refresh rate is working though, it's particularly dope for gaming, which I find easy to do because the specs are still high-end. No, this is not the Snapdragon 855 Plus, but it's not like the Pixel, any Pixel really, was trying to be a true gamer's phone, despite the fact that there are Pokemon hidden inside. A larger screen does make the XL easier on the eyes, even if it's not as easy in my hands. The large forehead can be an eyesore for some, but I don't really find that a big deal, especially compared to last year's travesty. If I had to put my first part of this review into a nutshell, it's that the Pixel 4 and the XL are unassuming phones. It's not trying to excel in any one aspect, as the spec sheet will probably tell you, but Google hopes that an understated outside will help you appreciate the capabilities it has once you get underneath the surface. Alright, so with design out of the way, let's continue to the spec sheet. This is the XL with higher RAM and higher storage, meaning 6GB and 128GB respectively. Pixels have never really given you more than you actually need, but these specs do pale in comparison to some really overachieving phones out there. There is one thing that I want to address real quick, and that is the lack, or rather the omission, of free full uploads on Google Photos. That's going to be a significant bummer to some who looked to the Pixels as a great way of saving space on their storage into the cloud. And it's kind of odd that this is a change because Google has been an advocate of their cloud storage since even the Pixel 2. And speaking of features that might not be in line with the rest of the competition, you have a 3700 mAh battery in the XL edition. That battery life leaves a lot to be desired is frustrating, but also a bit understandable considering that 90Hz refresh rate screen. What adds a little bit of salt to the wound is the fact that this only takes 18-watt charging. Now that's not bad, you can still get some power pretty quickly on here, and you might have to have this phone plugged in more often than not, but there are phones out there that from 0 to 100 it would only take about an hour, which is incredible, not the case for the Pixel 4. You lose the fingerprint reader, but that is part of the reason why this phone's design is so Spartan. Face unlock is easy, or maybe a little too easy to use, but the fact that it can work with even one's eyes closed means that you just shouldn't give this phone to someone you don't trust. That's pretty good advice for life, if you ask me. So what about Project Soli? Well, I guess there's no arguing that the radar chip in the Pixel 4 is non-essential. Sure enough, the concept was far more pleasing than the execution. You can float a hand near the phone to begin face unlock, which is nice, but then using it to control media has been far less consistent. It's not that I figured out how to make it work all the time, but probably the main tip I would give people is to just wave your hand generally in front of the phone rather than trying to aim for the top portion where the forehead is. I've seen a lot of people doing that, but the bottom line here is that there's a lot of waving and flicking through things like calls, music, and even just waving at Pokemon, and aside from all of that, there's not much else to say. At its core, Android is still an easy everyday smartphone OS with plenty of layers to peel back. That starts with Google Assistant, which can be triggered in a number of different ways, including squeezing the device, and to be honest, my least favorite method, which is swiping up from the bottom corner. It just doesn't feel all that natural. But on the topic of full screen gestures, by now I'm pretty used to swiping up from the bottom, swiping side to side on the bottom to get to different apps, and swiping up from the sides to go back. As far as other features are concerned, Android now has a system-wide dark mode, and it also has those digital well-being apps to make sure you're not staring at it for too long. New features include live voice dictation, which, perhaps unsurprisingly, is about as good as closed captioning in general can get. But that is basically what you're getting here, system-wide closed captioning. Let's say you're trying to view some sort of media that doesn't already have subtitles or built-in closed captioning. Well, Google's got your back. You just have to turn on that little icon as you change the volume setting, and then closed captioning is available across the entire device. There's also the Recorder app that has come in handy for presentations and conferences, but in all honesty, I still typed my notes while using the auto-transcribed audio notes as reference. Is this something that would be good for students? Probably, but is it a complete note-taking replacement? Probably not. Before we finish this thing off, let's talk about the sponsor of this video, NordVPN. If you've been waiting for Black Friday to jump onto a VPN service, this deal is for you. NordVPN has super fast servers in 60 countries, does no data logging, and has 24/7 customer support. You can unlock Netflix and other entertainment websites no matter where you are in the world. You could be in the coffee shop and you have a secure connection when using NordVPN, or you can even be in China and be able to access critical services like Google and YouTube. You can never be too sure about how secure your internet connection is, so having a service like NordVPN really helps bring that ease of mind. You can have up to 6 simultaneous connections, so you can have your laptop, the Pixel 4, and other devices connected to the internet through NordVPN and be able to access everything that you need. Now, like I said before, if you've been waiting for Black Friday, this is the deal that I can bring for you. You can get a 3-year plan at 84% off and get 2 amazing gifts: 4 extra months on your plan, along with access to NordLocker, a new file encryption system that NordVPN recently released. So check out NordVPN for yourself by going to the link nordvpn.com/Joshua Vergara. It is found in the description down below, but once again, it is nordvpn.com/Joshua Vergara. Thank you to NordVPN for sponsoring this video. Alright, just like any good YouTuber, when it comes to this phone, I have left the best part for last, and we're going to talk about these cameras here on the Pixel 4. Yes, that is a plural cameras. What's funny is that despite Google's best efforts, there actually isn't a huge amount of stuff to talk about here. The shooter is as good as it's always been, it just happens to have a few extra features. The main takeaway is that the Pixel hasn't lost its spot at the top, but everyone else seems to be catching up. The stills photography of this phone is still top-notch. Google's algorithmic processing means enjoyable photos even before you edit them. The colors are pleasing, the detail is high, and the Pixel's contrast-forward rendering is a breath of fresh air compared to all the other phones that are trying to make HDR the standard. Quick story, my brother, a long-time Pixel user and a former Nikon shutterbug, looked to the Pixel 3 and now the Pixel 4, as I have gotten one for him as well, as just straight cheating, especially when you look at the portrait modes. He used to buy so much glass for so much money in order to get the kinds of results that Pixels seem to give him. That portrait mode works for selfies as well, with the front-facing camera giving you just enough room to add a couple of extra people in the frame if you need to. A wide-angle front-facing camera would have been great, especially coming from the Pixel 3 XL, and especially for video. But the Pixel 4 makes it really clear that video is less of a focus this time around. I would go out on a limb here and say that while the video is decent in terms of quality and the stabilization is actually quite good, and audio is not too bad either, this is still not a phone for real serious smartphone vloggers. After all, there's no wide-angle camera on the rear. Instead, you get a zoom, and tech people like myself have famously lamented this decision. You know what? After weeks of using this phone in and out of special occasions and events, I have to admit that the zoom capabilities have come in handy. If you haven't done so already, you should watch my Pixel 4 real-world camera test, which was at a wedding where I had one of these phones set up just for the table so that everyone could grab it and just have some fun with it. But my main anecdote from that video is that I was sitting in the far back row of the ceremony with my Pixel 4, and I was able to do some really awesome zooms at high quality. Do I use zoom all the time? No. Do I wish there was a wide angle? Absolutely. But I'm using what I was given, and you know what? For the last number of weeks, I have enjoyed the picture taking experience that I've been given on the Pixel 4 XL. Now, the new camera features are noteworthy, but perhaps not totally necessary for most. Tap the viewfinder and you get the ability to change up the highlights and the shadows. This means that you can get some pretty high dramatic shots. This can be really useful, especially for low light situations where you do want to preserve the dark areas of a scene. You can even mess with the sliders while using the night sight mode. It's great to see how this level of split toning can be achieved live and in the moment. You don't have to go to a separate app after the fact in order to achieve the same result. And then there's, of course, astrophotography. Okay, let me rant about this for a little bit. I took this phone out in the mountains not too far from where I live, and I just pointed it up while it was on a tripod and activated the astrophotography mode. I was less than happy with the results. It just made me think I was terrible at astrophotography in general. But then I finally saw some of my friends and colleagues in the tech space, and they revealed to me the secret. You gotta edit the photos. So you take a photo like this, drop the exposure like crazy in Google Photos, you bring up the contrast, and then you mess with the shadows and highlights until you get your desired effect. It's at that point that you can find your stars. This is fine and all, but it's a great example of what I think encapsulates the Pixel 4's camera and then the Pixel 4 as a whole. This is a phone that is at its best when you just let it be. Some of the phone's features are literally there to take care of things for you, like the processing of a photo, screening calls, voice assistance, voice transcription, and honestly everyday in and out app experiences. But any extra features that require even a little bit of work on your part, they're nice, but they almost detract of what the joy of a Pixel can be. I'm talking about things like forcing the refresh rate, charging more often than you should need to, astrophotography like I just said, and even things like waving at Pikachu. When you keep things a little bit surface level with the Pixel 4 and the Pixel 4 XL, it's really easy to like it. And then once you start to peel back the layers, you start to think whether or not it's the kind of phone that you do actually want to invest in and have on the daily. Maybe this is the best way for me to put it. The Pixel 4 is like moving in with your best friend. They're your best friend for a reason, but ultimately, can you actually live with them all the time? And especially if you're going for the XL for the price that you might be putting down for it, that's definitely a question you want to ponder a lot harder with this phone than you might have with any other phone before it. And with that, that is my full review of the Pixel 4 XL. It took me a long time to finally put this thing together, and I think having a more long-term review of this actually helped a little bit because I can understand why there's so much of a polarized opinion on the Pixel 4. Don't get me wrong, I really enjoy this device. It's really easy for me to have as a daily driver. However, there are those quirks about it and maybe even those flaws about the phone that I understand will turn a lot of people off. So that's what I hope I was able to encapsulate in this somewhat longer review. I just wanted to talk at length about this, and I want to know what all of you think. If you have a Pixel 4, let me know what your experience has been in the comment sections down below. Drop some likes on this video so I know you like what I'm doing here at my channel, and then subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Consider hitting that bell over on the side so you can keep up with everything I'm doing here at JV. But with all of that said, I'm gonna go ahead and call it on this one. Thank you so much for watching, and until my next video, man, I need a sip of this right now, I would just remind you to enjoy your tea, everybody.